Good morning. We're going to start with lesson 1, getting acquainted. So the first thing, obviously, we need to start our Flash Professional. It's stored in the CS5 Premium folder, and it's the Flash Professional, not the Catalyst. So let's go ahead and get that open. And the first thing we need to do is just to show what this file will look like. We'll open the ending file while that's loading here. The ending folder to see what it's going to look like. So let's go ahead and open up the end.swf. This is the compiled movie of the FLA file. The FLA is kind of like the source file. The SWF is what plays in a browser. So let's go ahead and open that. And you see it goes on a loop. That's basically what we're going to build today. So that just gives you an idea. Let's go ahead and click on File, New. We're going to create a new FLA Flash document, and we're going to use ActionScript 3. That requires that your browser has Flash Player 9 or later. Although we're not going to use ActionScript, that's what we want for compatibility's sake. So we say OK. And that's always a good idea to save as soon as possible and to save often. So let's go ahead and call this 01 working copy.fla, and we'll save it in our start folder for now. All right, so this is the current folder or file that we have open. You can have multiple Flash documents open at the same time, much like Photoshop. You'll see a lot of similarities here with Photoshop. So we have, this is the basic layout. We have different layers, so we're going to be building up various layers that form like a film strip. So it's a lot like Photoshop. You have a layer that goes on top of another layer, and it's like you're laying them on pages on top of a desktop. You only see through different pieces of those layers. Then we have the stage. This is the main working area of our document. The white part is the visible area that will be seen, and this other part is like a preview page or a place to store things that are not seen. We can store graphic images off on this gray area, but only the white part is going to be seen. So we can use that to transition elements into the scene and things like that. Down here is our timeline, which shows a frame. This works on a frame-by-frame basis. So, and we're currently running at 24 frames per second. So if I click here, I'm on the 20th frame, and so we can look at those later. On the right, we have some toolbars and properties and all kinds of interesting things that we will be working with. The properties inspector is something we'll use a lot. We can also set our own workspace. So if we go in this workspace button up here, there's some preset workspace layouts. And basically they're layouts of different panels, and there are a lot of panels in Flash. And so we can select one that most animators like to use. For instance, this is an animator, but you can see the scene is still here down below. This is the visible part, and we have different panels open that are usually open for those types of things. We can have a small screen, and that would be where we'd have the toolbar on the left. This is a lot more like Photoshop. We're going to be using the essentials, and there's all kinds of different things. We can change heights and widths of these different places, make our properties bigger. We can select different palettes and say I want the color swatches to be open all the time. I can move it over here and have all kinds of different layouts of this essentials. And so next time I come into my essentials, it will look like that. And there's always a way to reset it. So let's go ahead and reset that. Takes all the changes that I made out of that, gets us back to out of the box transition here. We can also create our own workspace. So if I want to move let's say let's move this over to the right, and I'm going to move the whole property. And notice how as I get closer to the left edge, this little gray bar pops out. That means I can hook this to the edge of that screen here, so or of my window. So I can move some of these things closer, make this a longer, narrower toolbar, which is more like something I'd want. And I can always say then create a new workspace, and I'm going to say call this Dave's workspace. So that is now selected and saved, and I can go back and forth between Essentials, where it's on the right, and Dave's workspace, which is on the left. So you can customize this however you'd like, and I think you will as you get more used to how things work. You'll be seeing yourself do that. But we're going to work with the Essentials. That's the way the book is laid out, and we'll go from there. So here, this big white rectangle again is the stage, and this gray area is called the Pasteboard. It's a place to put some things that aren't going to be visible. We can view this stage in different magnification modes, so I can say I want it to fit in the window, and it will enlarge to fit however big I have my Flash document. If I have it full screen, I could make this even bigger. View, magnification, fit in window, and so my stage is a lot bigger. I usually like to work in 100% mode, and what that does is that lets me know exactly how big this will show up when I actually finally publish it, typically in a HTML document. So that's the size that I like to work at. Anything else gives you a false sense of what the final outcome will be. So we can change the stage properties. At the bottom of the Properties Inspector, this is the Properties tab over here on the right, and you can see the size of this entire stage is at 550 by 400 pixels. So I'm going to change that, and the book likes us to go to 800 by 600. And I don't have to type the PX. The PX is standard, so I just type 800 and 600. The rest is fit in. Let's change the background color. I can do that by clicking on the box and then selecting a darker gray background, which is what they want, is all threes in a CSS color code. And then I can say OK. So now my screen, my stage is a little bigger. I can center it here in the middle, and it's got a background of dark gray. The next thing we want to work with is called the library, and this is a way of storing assets or actors to our stage. And actors are things like a picture, a photograph, a piece of a movie, titles, text, things like that we're going to put onto the stage at various points in our development process here. So let's get some things into our library, and so we're going to say File, Import, Import to Library, and I'm going to go to my 01 Start folder, and I'm going to click on the background.jpg image and say Open. That puts the file in the Library tab. Notice I had to switch between Properties and Library to see this. And if I click on it, it gives me a nice little preview up here, which is pretty cool. I can make that preview bigger, and that tells me exactly what that picture looks like. And I'm going to have more of these here. So I'm going to go ahead and import some more. Import to Library. And I'm going to go ahead and select 3 at a time and open all 3 files. So now I can look at all 3 of these. The little thumbnail is shown at the top. Makes it very nice, very visual way of looking at things. So now that we have things in our library, we like to put them onto the stage. So we're going to start by moving the background image onto the stage. So we just drag it from the library over to the top, and you can see that I can move it anywhere I want onto the stage. And remember that at this point only the dark background square is what's going to be visible. So some of this would be lying outside the visible area. But as I move it closer, you see that there are some dotted lines in the lower left-hand corner as I get closer to aligning it. And it's very nice. It kind of clicks into the left and right spaces, and it lets me put it right where it should be, right covering the entire image here. All right, so now we have a background. We have a place to start, and we're going to start working with our layers now. And layers, like I said before, are a lot like Photoshop. Layers are just pieces of our actors or photos layered on top of each other, like you're putting them on top of a desktop. Or multiple strips of film that you put on top of each other. So we can it starts with giving us one layer. I can double click on that and change the name of that. So let's change that to background and hit return, and that sets the name. So now I have the name of this is called background. It's a good idea to name your layers, not just layer 1, 2, 3, 4, but make them specific, just like in Photoshop, so you know exactly what that layer contains. Now we can lock or make invisible this, just like in Photoshop. This eye says to show or hide the layers. If I click on the eye itself, it locks all of the layers. If I had multiples here, same with the lock. And I'm going to lock this layer because I don't want to move it again. I want everything to be happy there. So let's start by adding a new layer on top of the background. And so we'll select the background layer and say at the top we're going to say Insert Timeline Layer. So that creates a new layer called Layer 2. And I can double click this again and call it Photo 1. We're going to add a Photo 1 here. And now we're going to add a photo into this layer itself. So I have the photo selected, and I'm going to drag Photo 1 on top of our stage here, and I'm going to put it over here somewhere. Notice how it leaves kind of what they call an onion skin behind as I move where it came from. That's pretty cool, so I know if I'm aligning or moving something, this will become very useful in terms of animation. That's called an onion skin, a light reflection of what that object was. So let's go and do this again. I've got now Photo 1, and I can either select this Insert menu again, Timeline Layer, or they have a nice shortcut here, this little notepad with a corner turned up is a new layer. And it depends, it's very important to select the layer below where you want the new layer to be, because the new layer will always go above the currently selected layer. So if I'm selecting background and I say new layer, it puts the new layer above background and below photo. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer, right click, delete layer. I can click on photo and say add layer, and we're going to call this Photo 2. So now I have two photos, Photo 1, Photo 2. And I can move these around and things. I can change a photo to be above another one. I can change relative positioning of each layer, and we'll probably be doing that later. Now we're going to get into timelines, and this currently has 3 different layers, but only one frame. Only one frame here is filled. And we're going to put a bunch of frames, because if I played one frame and we're playing this movie at 24 frames a second, that one frame would play for just a few milliseconds, and it would finish, the movie would be over. It's basically a static picture at this point. And what good is that? I could make a static picture in Photoshop. So let's move on to some more fun stuff. So let's select frame 48, like it says in the Photo 1 I'm sorry, in the background layer, select frame 48, and they've numbered them in series of 5. And once I click on that frame, you can see it 45, 46, 47, 48. So we're going to change and add some frames to this. So I can go, once I've clicked and selected that, I'm going to say Insert, Timeline, Frame. And what that does is that selects and creates basically 48 frames. Why do you think we selected 48? Well, at 24 frames a second, how many seconds is 48 frames? Well, that's 2 seconds. And down below you'll see this. Now that I have a frame here, it shows me I'm on frame 48. I'm at 24 frames a second. So this entire sequence here is 2 seconds, and it gives you that as a timeline. So I can create new frames using seconds or frames, whatever. Most people use frames and do the calculations in their heads. And now we're going to add a photo into this layer itself. So I have the photo selected, and I'm going to drag photo 1 on top of our stage here, and I'm going to put it over here somewhere. Notice how it leaves kind of what they call an onion skin behind as I move where it came from. That's pretty cool, so I know if I'm aligning or moving something, this will become very useful in terms of animation. That's called an onion skin, a light reflection of what that object was. So let's go and do this again. I've got now photo 1, and I can either select this insert menu again, timeline layer, or they have a nice shortcut here, this little notepad with a corner turned up as a new layer. And it depends, it's very important to select the layer below where you want the new layer to be, because the new layer will always go above the currently selected layer. So if I'm selecting background and I say new layer, it puts the new layer above background and below photo. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer, right click, delete layer. I can click on photo and say add layer, and we're going to call this photo 2. So now I have 2 photos, photo 1, photo 2, and I can move these around and things. I can change a photo to be above another one. I can change relative positioning of each layer, and we'll probably be doing that later. Now we're going to get into timelines, and this currently has 3 different layers, but only one frame. Only one frame here is filled. And we're going to put a bunch of frames, because if I played one frame and we're playing this movie at 24 frames a second, that one frame would play for just a few milliseconds, and it would finish, the movie would be over. It's basically a static picture at this point. And what good is that? I could make a static picture in Photoshop. So let's move on to some more fun stuff. So let's select frame 48, like it says in the photo 1. I'm sorry, in the background layer, select frame 48, and they've numbered them in series of 5. And once I click on that frame, you can see it 45, 46, 47, 48. So we're going to change and add some frames to this. So I can go, once I've clicked and selected that, I'm going to say Insert, Timeline, Frame. And what that does is that selects and creates basically 48 frames. Why do you think we selected 48? Well, at 24 frames a second, how many seconds is 48 frames? Well, that's 2 seconds. And down below, you'll see this. Now that I have a frame here, it shows me I'm on frame 48. I'm at 24 frames a second. So this entire sequence here is 2 seconds, and it gives you that as a timeline. So I can create new frames using seconds or frames, whatever. Most people use frames and do the calculations in their heads. All right. So now we can move this scrubber bar back and forth. It's pretty useful. And we can also click and drag on the keyframe itself and see the little box underneath the cursor. This little gray box let us know that we can move that. So they want us to move it to frame 12. And so now the keyframe starts at 12. The scrubber bar before that shows empty photo 2, but now at frame 12, pop, now we have our nice little photo 2 showing up, and it shows up now for the next 36 frames. So we can move these keyframes around with our layers on the left and have them show up at any point in our movie. So let's go over here and create some more layers. We have our photo 2. Remember, we want to create a layer. It's going to go above the currently selected layer. So let's create a new layer. We're going to call it photo 3. And we're going to insert a keyframe, in this case, on frame 24. Now remember, if you can't remember which it is, it shows you the frame number down here. So we're on frame 24, not 25. We want to be on frame 24. So at 1 second into our movie, we're going to add a new keyframe. And from here, we can also right-click and say Insert Keyframe. So that's another way to do the same thing. Lots of ways. Now we're going to drag our third photo onto the stage. And now we've got 3 photos. And move your scrubber bar back and forth, and you see that at frame 12, bang, we get photo 2. At frame 24, bang, we get the photo 3. So this is a good way to see all that it looks like. At this point, again, let's save often. So I'm going to hit save, which the shortcut is Control-S. I usually hit Control-S very frequently because I don't like to lose my information. All right, now we can, in our timeline, just like in Photoshop, we can create folders. So let's create a folder, and remember it depends on where we are selected because it will create the new item above this currently selected layer. So we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call it Photos. And so the idea here is that I can put all 3 of these photos inside of this folder, and then I can collapse and expand these areas, and that photos now becomes like an object by itself. So I can drag each of these into the photo, click and drag the layer, bang, 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 and they all go up, and I can rearrange them. Now I can collapse and expand this photos folder, and nothing has changed. I can move my scrubber head here, and everything looks the same. I've just been able to organize it into a nicer fashion, so I can close up pieces that are complete. All right, moving on. We can change the appearance of the timeline. There's a menu over here on the left. I don't do this very often. I can have a real tiny timeline. These are a little bit difficult to select, but if you have lots of frames, it might make sense. Normal is where we were at. I can have short, which shrinks up the vertical distance of each of these, which isn't too bad. If I had a lot of layers, that would make sense. But let's go ahead and select not short and continue on from there. All right, let's select the Properties Inspector and go and look at these various pieces. So we want to move these using some hard numbers instead of just grabbing and moving these around the screen. Let's go back to frame 1 on photo 1, and instead of moving this around by the mouse, we can actually say I want this at 50 50, and it will position it a lot nicer. It looks like the 50-50 is calculated from the upper left-hand corner. So this is 0, 0 for the stage, and this is 0, 0 for the image, or the photo here. So the distance between here is 50 to the right and 50 down. 50 in the x coordinates going horizontally, and y going positively down the page here. All right, now we can open up the transform panel, and that is in the window transform, or Control T, and that brings up yet another panel that lets us do some rotations on this. So if I notice how if I don't have the photo selected and I try to go to the transform, it doesn't let me do anything. None of these options are available to me. I need to select the object that I want to apply the transform to. So when I select it, you see a light blue or a dark blue border around that particular object. Then when I select the transform, I get things that I can do with it. So I can click on this and rotate it by clicking and dragging my mouse, or I can type in numbers, double click, and type in -12 degrees, which is what they want us to have. And now let's go to frame 12 on photo 2, click on the object, go to the transform menu again, Control T, and they want us to rotate it 6 degrees. So I'm going to say 6 degrees. And the X and Y positions, they want it to be 80 and 50. All right, so now that looks pretty good. Now it's kind of a pain. We're going to be using this transform a lot. So when you bring up the menu, the transform, remember this is just a tab, and I can move this tab anywhere I want. So I'm going to click on the tab itself, move it over next to the library, and now I have the transform right next to the library. So I can get at that a lot faster. So I can close this little tab down, this little panel down using these right arrows, and that goes away. Now my transform is set up. And let's go to photo 3, frame 24, select the photo so it has an edge, and we're going to change this properties to be 120 and 55 with a transform of -2. All right, much more artistic than I am. So now we have some different transformations. Again, save, Control S, save. Now we're going to add some text. So let's click, let's go ahead and close our photos, click on the photo layer, and now we want to add a new layer, and we're going to call this one text. All right. I'm going to lock all of these other layers because I don't want to hurt those. And I'm going to move my frame head to number 36, which would be right here. And I'm going to actually select the frame so that it's blue underneath the scrubber head. Remember, the scrubber head doesn't have anything to do with what frame I'm going to currently select. So currently 36, verify I'm on 36 here. I'm going to insert a keyframe. And now I can start adding some text. So my keyframe is selected. It's still blue. I'm going to go over to my Tools menu here on the left. On the right. Select the big capital T. And the T now, every time I select a new tool on the right, these properties change. So if I select some of these, the lasso tool or the text tool, notice how these properties are associated with the tool that I'm going to use. So if I select the rectangle, here it's got all kinds of things with style and stroke and colors and all kinds of different things that I can play with. So let's select text and select some fonts and things. I'm going to go ahead and select Broadway and size 42. Let's select a nice ugly color. I like blues. maybe a little lighter blue. And the size is going to be 42. Again, I can move this scale around. Let's leave it at 42. All right. Also, I want to select classic text and static text. I'm not going to use dynamic or input text. This is used more for some action script. I can select text that somebody types and use that and display it, things like that. We want classic and static. Once that's selected and I have my frame selected, and somehow it got unselected in all of my transitioning, so make sure that the blue is set on frame 36. I'm going to click and start typing welcome to Coney Island. Wish you were here. All right. Now, to get out of the text mode, I can come back and click on the selection tool, the arrow, and now I can move that around and put that anywhere I want. Notice again the onion skin is left alone here. And I can change the colors of this or change the size. Let's make it a little bigger. Put it over here. Looks pretty good. Maybe that color's not so good, so let's even select a darker, I don't know. They have something like this green fluorescent color. So let's go ahead and select that. I can move the text around, or I can use hard positioning again. And also I can apply the transformation. So I can rotate it a little bit, and they want it rotated. They don't give you a specific, but just rotate a little bit. And you can see we can rotate it all over the place here. Just a little bit, be a little more artsy. And there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and save that again. And let's talk about the history or the undoing step. So say I didn't want to have that, I could say undo the move. The last step was a move. And it keeps up to 100 steps in our history. So the last one before the move was a transform. And the last one before that was another move. And so it keeps 100 of the last actions that I have, which is pretty handy. Let's go and look at the actual history. If we go to Window, Other Panels, History, again, this is a tab, and I can move it around. Let's put it next to my transform just so I can see. And these are all of the history of the various things that I did. So here's the keyframe. If I go backwards in time by moving this up, you see that things get moved around and basically go back to the beginning. So there's 100 of these little things here. I'm going to go all the way and not undo all of this stuff because I spent a lot of time on it. So let's go back to where I was here. Just to show you, I can click on these and see what it was at that particular time. All right, so let's go ahead and look and see what our movie looks like. So I'm going to save this. And under Control Menu, I can say Test Movie in Flash Professional. And it goes ahead and starts up the movie and runs through the timeline. And you can see that we're at about, 2 seconds of animation. It shows my 3 pictures and then my text at the end. And this goes through a loop automatically just so you can see the different things. As soon as I said test, if I look in my document here, in my folder where I'm saving the original FLA document, that's the document that I'm working on now, as soon as I said test in Flash, it created the Swift file for me automatically. So it creates that as the published file. So I can double click on that and it will open up in Flash and I can see the animation that I've created. Isn't that nice? In the properties, if I click on the, not on the stage, but around this in the gray area, you can see the Swift history. This is the last time that that Swift file was published or created. So it compiled it into that movie that I could then send around to people. So let's look at how we would publish the movie. Let's go to File, Publish, Settings, and let's look at this. They want us to select the Flash and the HTML. Those are by default on automatically. And then under the HTML tab, we can undo the loop. So we only want this to play once. Otherwise, it'd be kind of annoying, but inside of an HTML browser to be looping all the time. But there are some advertisements and things like that that do go into a loop situation. So let's go ahead and publish that. And it publishes it, okay. And now I have my Swift here. Again, playing it in Adobe plays it as a loop. But if I open up the HTML file that it created for me, it plays it once and quits. So there's my nice Flash. I can look at the source code here and see what it created for me. You can see this is the object. And so you could take this div, for instance, and paste it into your own layout, your own HTML, and everything would be just really cool. All right, so there's other formats that we can play with. There's an XFL file, which is an uncompressed format, and it stores everything as separate files so that we can change in and out files. It's kind of a nice way to send to people so they have all of your assets. So maybe you're working with a team. So let's say save as, and we're going to save it as an XFL document inside of our start folder, and we're going to call it, by default, it's going to be 01 workingcopy.xfl. So when I save that, in my working folder now, I have this folder called Working Copy, and that has in it all kinds of information, some XML files, the actual Flash file. Inside the library are the actual images that I created that are part of the assets of my document here. So to show that we can manipulate this, let's go ahead and delete photo 3 from this document and go and pull up the photo 4 and copy this and go back into the library folder and paste it. So we're going to basically replace photo 2. Now photo 3 is what's actually referenced in the various settings. So we need this file name to match. So we're going to change it to photo 3. Now let's go ahead and close our working copy, our XFL file, and from the disk, let's go ahead and open up the XFL file that we created in that working folder. So if I open that up now, you see that photo 3 now has the balloons in it instead of that whatever the other one was. Photo 3 was the Ferris wheel. So now we have balloons instead of the Ferris wheel. Everything else works the same. I can test the movie, and the new balloons show up instead of the Ferris wheel. So that's just to show you how these documents can be manipulated, saved in different formats. And what you need to send to me, all I need is your Flash working copy file, .fla file, and I can see that you've done everything from that point. So let's start by sending me that, not the SWF file. I want your actual working document. That's basically your source. It will have in it all of the layers and things that you need. I hope you enjoyed this and look forward to some more lessons.